At just 10 years old, Besong believed her life was perfect. But one rainy night changed everything. Everyone loved Besong from the very first day she was born. Her wide and bright eyes wandering gently from face to face like someone just discovering the world for the very first time. Every time someone leaned closer, she looked up with a sweet, innocent smile that melted every heart around her. Her tiny fingers curled like flower petals, and her cheeks glowed with softness of fresh clouds after rain. She did not speak, yet her smile said everything: joy, peace, and a quiet kind of love that filled the room like sunlight through a window. Besong was born into a family of 4. Her mom, dad, her elder sister Sarah, and herself. They lived in the city of Douala, Cameroon. She was the happiest little girl, filling every room with laughter and innocent joy until the day she turned 10. That was the year the light in her world began to fade, and life slowly became something she no longer understood. The night of her 10th birthday, she was asleep with her teddy bear pressed against her chest. The rain was falling softly outside. The sound of rain against her window was one of her favorite night sounds. It made her fall asleep just within minutes of lying down. Unfortunately, that night wasn't the usual. In fact, that night changed rain forever for her. Just minutes after she lay down to sleep, 30 minutes to midnight, she heard footsteps down the hallway. Then she heard her door creak open. She was scared for a second, but then she thought it would definitely be her dad or mom coming to check on her. "Daddy, is that you?" she whispered. A manly figure stood near the door in silence. The hallway light behind him made his face look dark. He slowly closed the door. "Shh," he said. Still in Besong's little mind, it was her father coming to bid her good night. She had no idea that right in front of her stood the moment that would steal her innocence forever. The night her childhood would quietly die before she was even old enough to understand what was happening. He slowly sat beside her on the bed. In the dim silence of the room, she finally noticed the dark ski mask covering his face. Fear tightened around her chest, and just as she opened her mouth to scream, his palm quickly covered her lips, swallowing her cry before it could escape. "If you make a sound," he whispered, "I'll kill you and your parents too. So if you don't want that to happen, stay quiet and be still." This sent shivers down her spine. Suddenly, the air in the room was heavy and everywhere silent, except for the faint sound of rain tapping against the window. Besong froze beneath the blanket, her small body trembling as fear wrapped itself around her like cold chains. She did not fully understand what was happening, only that something was terribly wrong. His shadow loomed over her, stealing the safety she had always known inside those 4 walls. The air felt hard to breathe. Her tiny hands clutched the bedsheets as tears rolled quietly down her cheeks, disappearing into the pillows beneath her. She wanted to scream for her mother. She wanted to run to her sister's room and hide until morning came, but fear held her still. That night, something inside her changed forever. Childhood, once bright and full of laughter, slipped quietly away into the darkness with her unheard cries. When he was done with the terrible act, he grabbed her shoulders tightly. "Listen to me carefully," he whispered bitterly. If you tell anyone about this, you know exactly what will happen, right? Besong nodded quickly. Then he walked out. She sat alone in the dark, terrified, 10 years old, trying to understand why she suddenly felt dirty inside her own skin. The next morning, Besong's mom was making pancakes while her dad sat at the dining table drinking coffee. "Good morning, sleepyhead," her mom greeted with a smile. "Good morning, princess," her dad greeted too with a cheerful smile. The once bubbly and joyful Besong just stood there looking lost, like she was physically there but her mind was somewhere else. Her mom quickly noticed and touched her forehead. "Baby, are you okay? Are you sick?" Before she could answer, her dad spoke. "She probably had a nightmare." "Did you have a nightmare, my darling?" Mom asked. Besong thought about telling her parents the truth, but she also remembered the threats, so she just shook her head. "Don't worry, okay? It was just a nightmare. Cheer up and eat your breakfast," her mom said. That became her life. Silence. She was getting sexually abused by the man in the mask almost every day. And the worst of all was that she couldn't tell anybody about it. "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." Praise the Lord. Prophet Enoch thundered from the pulpit, his voice echoing through the packed sanctuary. The congregation erupted in loud amens as hands lifted towards the heavens. To the world, Prophet Enoch was a man chosen by God, a powerful self-proclaimed prophet whose name traveled far beyond the borders of his country. He was internationally recognized for his powerful sermons, accurate prophecies, and miraculous healings. Surrounded by wealth, influence, and admiration, he even owned a TV station dedicated to spreading his sermons across countless homes and his charity works in the country and beyond. Besong was raised in that world of luxury and praise. Prophet Enoch was her dad. She grew up in riches, wrapped in comfort and privilege, never lacking a single thing money could buy. From the outside, her life looked perfect, like a beautiful testimony everyone envied. Prophet Enoch's family always sat in the front row of the church, directly facing the pulpit like royalty before a throne. To many, they looked like the perfect family, blessed by God himself. But anyone who looked closely at Besong could see that something inside the little girl had changed. The laughter that once danced so freely around her had disappeared. She had become quiet and withdrawn, startled by the smallest sounds. Her eyes no longer carried the innocence of a carefree child. Instead, they carried fear, the kind a child should never know. Besong was a shining star in school. She was brilliant beyond her age, always the best in her class, always several steps ahead of everyone else. Her teachers admired her deeply, often praising her intelligence, discipline, and bright future whenever her parents came to pick her up from school. "She is exceptional," they would proudly say. "That child is going places." Books once felt like a beautiful world she could easily conquer. Her laughter filled classrooms, and her confidence carried the quiet glow of a child destined for greatness. But after that night, everything slowly began to change. The little girl who once answered every question with confidence slowly became distant and distracted. Her eyes no longer carried curiosity. They carried exhaustion. Homework went unfinished. Her concentration disappeared. The same child who once topped every exam now struggled to keep up. Her grades began failing drastically, one painful term after another. The teachers were confused. Some thought she was sick. Others believed she was becoming stubborn or lazy. None of them could understand how such a brilliant child could suddenly lose herself so completely. Again and again, the head teacher called her parents to school, hoping to uncover the reason behind the drastic change. What happened to Besong? She would ask with deep concern. This is not the same child we once knew. But each time, silence followed the question. No one could truly explain what was happening to her because the real reason lived behind closed doors and buried inside the frightened heart of a child, carrying a pain far too heavy for her young soul. It was a Sunday, and throughout the entire service, her mother could not take her eyes off of her. The more she watched, the heavier her heart became. This was no longer her cheerful little Besong. Something deep inside her had shifted. What is happening to our daughter? Besong's mother asked softly as she followed her husband into his office immediately after the service. Prophet Eno loosened his tie and looked at her with tired eyes. What do you mean? Haven't you noticed how different Besong has been these past few days? She asked, her voice filled with worry. Please, can you just get to the point? He replied impatiently. You know I have been very busy with church activities. Tears almost gathered in her eyes as she spoke again. She has completely changed. She barely talks to anyone. She avoids people, stays alone, and looks frightened all the time. I am truly worried. Prophet Eno waved his hand dismissively. You women worry too much. I am sure it's just a stage. She will be fine. His wife stared at him in disbelief. No, I don't think you worry enough, she answered quietly. She is my daughter and I know her. Something is wrong. When we get home, I am going to speak with her again. Prophet Eno sighed and placed a hand on her shoulder. Darling, my God will never allow anything bad to happen to our daughter. That is why I am not worried. She forced a weak smile. All right, baby, I will see you at home. Outside, Besong sat silently in the back seat of the car, staring through the window as though her mind was somewhere far away. The driver quietly started the engine and drove them home. The moment they arrived, Besong stepped out of the car and walked straight to her room without saying a single word. No smile, nothing. After freshening up, her mother stood outside Besong's bedroom door for a moment, her heart pounding with fear. She could not explain. Then slowly she turned the handle and walked in, sat beside her daughter on the bed, and gently brushed her fingers through her hair. The room was quiet except for the soft sound of the ceiling fan turning above them. Baby, she whispered softly. Talk to me. What is going on with you? Besong kept her eyes fixed on the floor, her tiny fingers trembling in her lap. Did someone hurt you? Her mother asked carefully. Besong's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Suddenly, The terrifying voice echoed loudly inside her mind again. If you make a sound, I'll kill you, your mom and your dad too. Fear tightened around her chest. No, Mommy, she lied quietly. Her mother frowned gently. Then why do you look so afraid all the time? You don't laugh anymore. You barely eat. Even when I touch you, you jump like someone scared you. Tears slowly gathered in Besong's eyes. She wanted to throw herself into her mother's arms and tell her everything, every terrible thing, every frightening night. But the fear was stronger than her courage. Mommy, she whispered weakly before stopping again. Yes, my baby. Besong looked into her mother's eyes for a long moment. Her heart screamed to tell the truth, but her mouth refused to move. What if he really kills them? She thought silently. I'm just tired, she finally muttered. Her mother gently lifted her chin. Besong, you know you can tell me anything, right? No matter what it is. At those words, a tear escaped down Besong's cheek. She nodded slowly, but deep inside, she felt trapped in a nightmare she did not know how to escape from. Sarah, Besong's elder sister, was 20 years old and lived far away in Boya with her uncle, her mother's younger brother, where she attended the university. Unlike the rest of the family, Sarah was not deeply religious. She even thought she possessed strong spiritual instincts and a sharp sense for things people tried to hide. Being the daughter of the famous prophet Enoch was never something she enjoyed. The moment people discovered who her father was, they treated her differently, some with fake respect, others with uncomfortable fear and admiration. All Sarah ever wanted was a normal life, to laugh freely, make friends naturally, and live like every other young woman her age, without carrying the heavy shadow of her father's name everywhere she went. That was one of the reasons she chose to move many miles away from home and stay with her uncle in Boya. Meanwhile, the years passed quietly, but the darkness in Besong's life never left. The abuse continued in silence, night after night, year after year. At such a young age, Besong learned how to survive inside her pain. The cheerful little girl she once was had disappeared long ago. Her laughter became rare, her smiles carefully forced, like sunlight trying to break through a heavy stormy cloud. To most people, she looked fine, but everyone with deep eyes, the kind that truly saw beyond appearances, could notice the sadness hidden behind her silence. She had always been Daddy's little girl, and Prophet Enoch tried countless times to bring back the daughter he once knew. He showered her with expensive gifts, luxurious clothes, vacations, and anything money could buy. But no amount of wealth could heal what had been broken inside her. Nothing ever worked the way he hoped. As time passed, even her mother slowly began convincing herself that perhaps it was only a difficult teenage phase. The mood swings, the silence, the emotional distance. She held on to the hope that one day Besong would wake up and become her joyful self again. But deep down, something still troubled her heart. Then came the day of Besong's 15th birthday. The house was alive with preparations. Decorations filled the living room. Music played softly in the background, and workers moved around, arranging flowers and cheers for the celebration. Besong and her mother stood together, preparing for the party, surrounded by beauty, laughter, and luxury. Her dad was at the church as usual, but had to return home soon to attend his little girl's birthday party. Few minutes later, there was a knock at the door. "Martha, check who's at the door," Besong's mother shouted from the kitchen area as workers moved around the house preparing for the birthday celebration. Martha, one of the maids, quickly wiped her hands on her apron and hurried towards the door. The moment she opened it, a warm smile spread across her face. It was Sarah. She had not been home in a very long time. The second Besong saw her elder sister standing at the door, something inside her lit up again. Without thinking, she dropped everything in her hands and ran straight into Sarah's arms. For the first time in years, her smile came naturally. She hugged her tightly, almost desperately, as though she had finally found a safe place after being lost for too long. The bond between the two sisters had always been strong, deeper than ordinary words could explain. "Oh, my little bee," Sarah said softly, holding her face with both hands. "How have you been?" "I'm fine, big sis," Besong answered with a smile. But Sarah felt it immediately. Behind that smile was pain. The moment they embraced, Sarah sensed something heavy buried deep inside her sister's soul. A silent cry, a longing for freedom, a darkness Besong was trying desperately to hide. Sarah had always been spiritually sensitive. She noticed things others ignored, and this feeling unsettled her deeply. "Are you sure?" Sarah asked again, this time more carefully. Besong forced another smile and nodded. "Yes, sister, I'm fine." Sarah stared at her for a moment longer before pushing her worry aside. "Anyway, happy birthday, my love," she said warmly, bringing out a beautifully wrapped gift. "I got you something." Besong's eyes immediately brightened with excitement as she collected the package. For a brief moment, she looked like the little girl she used to be. As the sisters laughed and exchanged playful words, their mother stood quietly by the corner, watching them with a soft smile on her face. Seeing them together again warmed her heart. Then Sarah turned towards her. "Mom," she said emotionally, walking closer, "I am so happy to see you." "Welcome home, my daughter," her mother replied warmly. They embraced tightly, holding into each other with the kind of love distance could never weaken. But beneath Sarah's smile, something troubled her mind. The night before her journey home, she had seen a strange and disturbing dream about Besong. A dream so vivid it shook her to the core. Sarah was not someone who ignored such things. Many of her dreams had come true before, especially the ones that had left fear sitting heavily inside her spirit. And this dream had terrified her. From the moment she arrived, it was the first thing she wanted to discuss with her sister. So while the birthday preparations continued downstairs, Sarah gently held Besong's hand and led her quietly toward the bedroom. Once the door closed behind them, the atmosphere changed completely. The room was quiet. Besong sat at the edge of the bed, her fingers trembling in her lap, her eyes swollen from holding back tears that had lived inside her for years. Sarah sat beside her. Her gentle hand touched her shoulder. You know you can tell me anything, right? She asked softly. Besong slowly lifted her head. Her eyes were red and watery, carrying the kind of pain no child should ever know. Out of everyone in the world, Sarah was the only person who felt safe enough to trust. Yet the words still refused to leave her mouth. Sarah studied her carefully. Then suddenly her heart sank. That look, she knew it. It was the same broken look she carried when she was only 10 years old. The same silent fear, the same hidden shame, the same pain that followed her like a shadow for years. A cold shiver ran through Sarah's body. Memories she had buried deep inside her came rushing back like a storm in the middle of the night. The whispers, the threats, the tears she cried into her pillow when everyone else was asleep. That was why she left home years ago to stay with her uncle. Not because she wanted to, but because she had to survive. And now it was happening again to her little sister. Everything suddenly made sense. The strange behavior, the silence, the sadness that had swallowed her little sister for the past 5 years. Sarah's eyes slowly filled with tears. Had someone been coming to do things to you at night? She asked, her voice shaking. Besong froze. Shock spread across her face. How did she know? Her mind screamed silently. Sarah saw the fear in her sister's eyes, and at that moment, the terrible truth hit her like a knife to the chest. Her suspicion was real. Her little sister had been living in hell. How long? Sarah whispered. Besong looked down, tears falling freely now. 5 years, she answered weakly before breaking into sobs. Sarah could not hold herself together anymore. She pulled Besong into her arms and cried with her. Not ordinary tears. Tears of pain, anger, and memories that truly never died. She knew exactly what Besong had endured because she had once walked through that same darkness alone. No child should ever carry such trauma. For a long moment, the sisters held each other tightly while the world outside continued like nothing was wrong. But inside that room, 2 broken hearts were bleeding together. Sarah wiped her tears slowly. Unlike before, she was older, stronger, and smarter. This time, she refused to let the monster continue hiding behind closed doors. Carefully, she questioned Besong about everything, the nights, the threats, the patterns. And then she came up with a plan. Before she could speak further, her mother's cheerful voice echoed from the living room. Sarah, Besong, come out. Your friends are here. The girls quickly looked at each other. Okay, Mom, we'll be right there, Sarah answered calmly. She turned back to Besong and held her face gently. Tidy up yourself, she whispered. No one must know about our plan, okay? And try to smile. Everything will be fine. Besong nodded slowly. For the first time in years, Besong felt like she could breathe again. Sarah was no longer just her sister. She was her safe haven. When they stepped into the living room, laughter and music filled the house. Friends and family crowded around happily. The moment everyone saw Besong, they burst into birthday songs and warm hugs. To everyone else, it looked like the perfect celebration. But hidden beneath the smiles was a storm waiting to explode. Hours later, The atmosphere suddenly shifted. The front door opened. Prophet Eno had arrived. The respected man of God walked into the house with pride in his steps and a holy smile on his face. People greeted him with admiration and respect. But near the fireplace, Sarah stood frozen beside Besong, her jaw tightening. There had always been bad blood between Sarah and her father. She hated the darkness she felt behind his holy image. While he saw her as the black sheep of the family, mostly because she was not religious enough to fit the perfect image of a prophet's daughter. The moment Prophet Eno saw her, his expression changed instantly. "What are you doing here, dressed like this?" he asked sharply. Sarah crossed her arms slowly. "I came for Besong," she replied coldly. "Not for you." The tension between them became so heavy, it almost silenced the entire room. "Please," Besong interrupted nervously. "Can we not do this today? It's my birthday." Immediately, Prophet Eno's face softened, like an actor changing mask. "Oh, I'm sorry, baby," he said warmly, turning to Besong with a smile. "Happy birthday. Look what I got for you." "Thanks, Dad," Besong replied quietly. The laughter from the birthday party slowly faded into silence as the night grew darker. One after another, the guests left the house with smiles on their faces, completely unaware that evil was hiding beneath that very roof. By midnight, the entire house was quiet, but inside Besong's room, fear was alive. She sat on her bed, hugging herself tightly. Her body was trembling uncontrollably. Even though Sarah had promised her everything would finally end tonight, terror still wrapped around her heart like chains. What if the plan failed? What if he escaped? Every small sound made her jump. Still, deep inside, another feeling slowly rose through the fear. Hope. For the very first time in 5 years, Besong was no longer facing the darkness alone. Across the hallway, in a dark corner, Sarah sat, awake in the silence, staring at the clock with restless eyes. Hidden outside the house, police officers waited patiently in complete darkness. Everyone was ready, everyone except the monster who thought tonight would be just another secret buried in silence. Then, 12 a.m., the doorknob slowly turned. Besong stopped breathing. The masked figure quietly stepped into the room like he had done countless nights before. His movements were calm, familiar, and confident, because he never imagined his evil would finally catch up with him. Besong's heartbeat pounded violently as the figure moved closer to the bed. Then suddenly, now, the room exploded with chaos. Bright flashlights flooded the darkness. The door burst open violently. A swarm of armed police officers stormed into the room. "Hands up! Hands up!" they shouted. The masked man panicked immediately and tried to run, but the officers blocked every exit instantly. "Please, please, it is not what you think," he screamed, his voice shaking with fear. For the first time in years, the hunter had become the hunted. Besong broke down, crying uncontrollably. Seconds later, Sarah rushed into the room and wrapped her trembling sister tightly in her arms. "It's over," she whispered in tears. "He can never hurt you again." Their mother, awakened by the noise downstairs, rushed out of her room in confusion. The moment she saw police officers flooding her house, her face turned pale. "What is happening here?" she cried. But when Sarah quickly explained everything, the woman froze completely. Her entire body weakened. The realization hit her harder than death itself. Her daughters, her precious girls, had suffered for years under her own roof, while she saw nothing. The guilt crushed her soul instantly. Tears poured down her face as she stared at the masked man, shaking in fear before the police. Then the officer in charge stepped forward. "Remove the mask." The room became deadly silent. The officer grabbed the mask firmly and pulled it off, and suddenly the world stopped. Every jaw dropped. Every breath disappeared. Every heart froze. "Dad?" Sarah whispered weakly. "Dad!" Besong screamed in horror. Their mother let out a painful cry before collapsing instantly to the floor. Kneeling before everyone was Prophet Eno Josiah, the famous prophet, the respected preacher, the beloved man of God, worshipped by millions across the world. The same man who had preached holiness on television every Sunday. The same man who claimed to heal the sick and perform miracles. The same man who raised his hands in church while hiding darkness behind his smile. He was the devil that had destroyed his own daughters for years. Handcuffed and surrounded by police, Prophet Eno finally broke down completely. "No, listen to me," he cried hysterically, but the officers dragged him forward. Prophet Eno Josiah, the lead officer, announced coldly, "You are under arrest for repeated sexual abuse, rape, child abuse, intimidation, and criminal conspiracy." The next morning, the entire world exploded with shock. Every television station, every radio channel, every newspaper headline, every social media platform, the story spread like wildfire. Crowds gathered outside police stations demanding answers. The church members cried in disbelief, while others fainted from shock after hearing the accusations. But things became even darker during the investigation. Under intense questioning, Prophet Eno finally confessed not only to abusing Sarah and Besong, but doing it for decades. He revealed that years ago, he joined a secret cult that promised him fame, supernatural influence, wealth, and power. According to the cult, one of the conditions for maintaining his anointing was the repeated abuse and sacrifice of innocents within his own bloodline. The world was horrified. Millions who once worshipped him felt betrayed. People who once traveled across countries for his miracles now realized they had been manipulated by a monster hiding behind religion. Anger erupted everywhere. Branches of his church across different countries were vandalized and destroyed by furious followers demanding justice. His ministry collapsed overnight. The mighty prophet who once stood before thousands now stood alone in a prison uniform. During the trial, Sarah and Besong finally told their story publicly. The courtroom sat in painful silence as the sisters described years of fear, manipulation, sleepless nights, and stolen childhoods. Even hardened police officers struggled to hold back tears. When the judge finally spoke, the entire courtroom held its breath. Prophet Eno Josiah, he said firmly, for your unforgivable crimes against your own children and humanity, this court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted. Some cried, some applauded, some simply sat in stunned silence. But for Sarah and Besong, it was the first breath of freedom they had taken in years. Still, healing was not easy. Their mother became consumed with guilt. Every day, she blamed herself for not seeing the signs sooner. How did I not know? She would cry repeatedly. How did I fail my children? But one evening, Besong held her mother's hand gently. You didn't fail us, Mom, she whispered softly. The evil was his, not yours. Sarah nodded with tears in her eyes. We survived, she said, and now we will heal together. Slowly, the broken family began rebuilding their lives, piece by piece. The nightmares became fewer. The laughter returned little by little. And for the first time in their lives, the house no longer felt haunted by fear. Years later, Sarah became a strong advocate for abused children, helping victims find their voices. Besong returned to school and slowly rediscovered the bright, the brilliant girl she once was before darkness stole her childhood. Together, the sisters became symbols of survival, not because they were never broken, but because they found the courage to rise after being shattered. And though the scars remained forever, justice finally found them. At last, the night that once destroyed them became the same night that set them free. Evil does not always wear a frightening face. Sometimes it hides behind smiles, titles, religion, fame, and even family. Many victims of abuse suffer silently because the people hurting them are trusted and respected by society. That is why parents, guardians, and loved ones must pay attention to sudden behavioral changes in children instead of dismissing them as bad attitude or stubbornness. A child who suddenly becomes withdrawn, fearful, aggressive, depressed, or distant may be silently crying for help. It is very important to build homes where children feel safe enough to speak, where they are listened to without judgment, and where protecting innocent lives matters more than protecting reputations. Because one conversation, one moment of attention, and one brave voice can save a life from years of silent suffering.